Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to Taking Off. We are taking off. There are several things that you need to know. Wherever you have a plan, an architectural plan, and you want to estimate the cost, you first of all need to know the quantities in that particular plan. How many bricks you are going to buy, uh, and also how much labor do you need for any construction work, whether it's a simple house, it's a toilet, or anything else. You need to do the taking off. So it is important that we should learn this subject so that it will enable us to come up with the quantities that would enable us for tendering. So to do the taking off, you need the dimension paper. So taking off is the process of reading off dimension from the drawings and writing them down in a specific order on a special paper called the dimension paper, and inserting an appropriate description. So as it is in this, you have to transfer, not necessarily transferring, but you read off the quantities from the drawing, and then you fill in this column in the appropriate column, I should say so, and it has to be accompanied by a description. So that will be the taking off. So the special paper that you use is an A4 paper size, which has got these 8 columns, I should say in total 8 columns, but in actual sense it has 2 pages on a single face. So you have the first column, the second column, the third column, and the wider fourth column. That's the first page of the dimension. The second page is this. So you have a replica of that. But normally you leave a space for binding on the edge of the paper, especially on the side. Yeah, so that's how it is. So the dimensions are scaled. Actually, when you're entering the dimensions here are scaled, or maybe they are taken direct from the drawings and entered in these spaces. So that's how it is. And so if we look at the columns, the first, like I said, so we are just taking, in this case, we just want to look at this half of a page, but that's a page as it is in this case. So we have that one. In this, we have the first column is the times in column, and then the second is the dimension column, the squaring column, and the description column. So this space which has been left here is there for binding purposes anyway, but the first column is the times in. So the times in column is used for multiplying the dimensions when necessary. Each number is followed by an oblique stroke. So this number is followed by an oblique stroke. A factor followed by a dot indicates an addition, or it is called dot on, like in this in this diagram. So when we are saying dot on, you have this part, this number, stroke, and 4. So you don't need to say 5 times 4 times 8 times that. But what you do is you say 5 plus 4, then the product you multiply by with 3.45, 7.49, 59, and then 0.15. So that's it. That's the purpose of dot one. Dot one normally comes in whenever you are doing your taking off, or maybe where you are transferring the dimensions, and then you come across, let's say for example, you have excavation for the columns, okay, and maybe you only considered maybe 2 excavation of columns, as it is in this case. Maybe if we look at where we have the example of dot one, assuming that you had area, you had 5 areas where you are going to do the excavation of the columns. But then you realize that you had forgotten or you didn't take into account or 4 more areas where you need to do some excavation, but all the same dimensions. So what you do, you just put a dot and then you have a 4. So whoever is going to square this is going to add 5 plus 4, which is 9. So you say 9 times 3.45 times this times that, and then the answer will be there. So that's the dot on. Then the next is the dimension column. So we've looked at the time sync, where you have maybe several identical objects that you are working on. Then you use the time sync column. But in this case, the dimension column is where you enter the dimensions from the plan. It's either after you have done some waste calculations or not, so you enter there. So normally, whenever you are entering the dimensions, here, if they are entered in the order of length, so you start with the length, breadth, and height. But if you have just one dimension as it is, and then it has been underlined, in this case, is linear. It means that it's the length of whatever you're measuring. But where you have 2 dimensions and then with a line, that is superficial item, or you are finding the area of an item. So you start with the length and then you have the breadth or the width for superficial items, not the other way around to say maybe breadth and then followed by the length. No. And next is the cubic item. So in the cubic item, a group of 3 dimensions indicates the volume, or maybe a cubic item. So we have 3 dimensions and then a line. But if we had these 3 dimensions, each separated by a line, those would have been linear items. But in this case, we don't have any line below these or under these figures, except for the third, which means that all these are cubic items. So you multiply this and that one, and then you have the answer there. So this is the cubic. But then, like I said, the order has to be the length, width, and the height or the depth. It might happen that whenever you are working out the length, or maybe the area superficial items, or especially superficial items, you see that maybe you only have the length and the height of a structure, like a wall on the length side, and then you have the height. Or maybe on the width side you have the width and the height. So in this case, you still need to follow this order. If you don't have any length, then you start with the width and then followed by the height. So the height is always the last variable to be written. So that order has to be followed to avoid confusions with the ones who are going to do your work, or maybe to check your work. Then we have another item. So for an item indicates an item of cost for which a quantity cannot be calculated. You may not calculate the quantity, but you just allow for the cost of that particular item. You discuss, or maybe you describe the nature of that particular item. So like in this case, in the dimension column, we just write item, and then on the description you say allow for bringing to site and removing from the site all plant required for the work section. So the cost of that, moving the plant to the site and also back to where the plant was, you just insert as a figure, and that's how it is. One item, just something that you cannot cost at the time of whenever you are taking off. Yeah. And next is the squaring column. So the third, from you have the time sync, then you have the dimension, then finally you have, of course, the last three, you have the squaring column, and on the wider section, that's the description. So the resulting areas and the volume is inserted in the time sync, and the dimension columns are subsequently calculated and entered into the squaring column opposite their respective dimensions. So let's imagine we are excavating this an area which is this length and wide and also deep, 0.5 millimeter deep. So whenever we want to calculate what will be the quantity of this, so you say 2 times 3.45 times 7.59 times 0.15. The answer is entered beside this. The answer is entered there. It means that this belongs to the products of these numbers. That's what we have. Okay, so that's the squaring column. The next is the description. So this is a wide column for entering over the measured work. Okay, like here we have these numbers times in dimensions, and we have that as squared. But then what are these numbers for? Now, in order to show what these numbers are for, you write a description for these numbers. Like in this case, we have hardcore fittings to make up levels and floors. Average thickness not to exceed 250 millimeters. In fact, for you to come up with the description, you normally follow what the SMM7 would ask you to do. Of course, we have a new code of estimating, which is the NRM, but maybe we'll be using the SMM7 for just the purpose of this. Of course, they are not that much different, but we still be using the SMM7 whenever we're doing our calculations. We'll discuss what the SMM7 entails, but in the meantime, we just want you to have an overview of the dimension paper, how to use the dimension paper. Of course, in the dimension paper, you also have two sections, like on the far end where you can do your waste calculations, and the descriptions are closer to the squaring column. So that's how it is. Of course, we'll be discussing that whenever we are doing this in our subsequent discussions. So thanks for your attention. That's what I had time for.